Hi, that's indeed a bright light. That's fine. Yeah, so before we go into the panel, we thought it would be good if I give a bit of context about the companies that I founded, Fairphone and The Click, and also a bit of background on myself. A bit about myself. I have a background in technology and design, and I really love to combine those two. It makes me, want to create stuff, but always think about what I'm creating to put it in the right context. I have a lot of experience with social innovation. I've used to work for a media lab where we do all kinds of things for education, but always use technology in a critical way. And I used to be one of those guys when as a kid, I got a computer, a Nintendo. The first thing I would do is take a screwdriver and take the whole thing apart, just to look what's inside. And I found that really important, because if you open up something, and this is my motto as well, if you open up something, you can really own it. And ownership is important. You can really dive into that product and really look inside and find out who made it. Why do they want me, don't they want me to really go into that product? So then at a certain point, I bump into Dan Hill. And Dan Hill is the guy who used to teach strategic design. And it really fascinated me. And he came up with this, with this quote, and I'll translate it a bit. It really boils down to, if you look at the world and the stuff you see around you, it's the stuff we don't see that creates the stuff we have around us. So if we really want to change the stuff around us, we have to dive into the dark matter, the stuff we don't see. So it kind of boils down to this. If you ask me to design a chair, I can design the chair, I can make it different, but I can also dive into the system that makes that chair, and if I change that system, if I impact there, all these chairs will have a different design. And that is really what system design is about, system change. And it really got me also encouraged to start my own company, because one of the biggest systems that we have and that we are reliant on nowadays is the economic system. The economic system is impacting socio-economical, the society, the geopolitical things. So what would be the best system to have an impact when you're a designer? Well, that would be in that system. You can have huge impact. So I really see building a company as designing something which you can have impact. So just to start with Fairphone. Fairphone started in 2011. We've started as a campaign around conflict minerals. Minerals that are being mined in countries like Congo, where millions of people have died in mining these minerals related to these conflicts. And these are minerals that we use in our electronics. These are minerals that we use in our batteries, in our Teslas, in our windmills, in our energy transition. And these are the areas where these minerals are mined. And we thought, this is a big problem, but what can you do about it? How can you start to really solve this? And this is where the dark matter came in. And we said, wait, let's make a phone. Let's go to Congo. Call the company Fairphone. I had a card, on the card was Bas van Abel, CEO of Fairphone. We went there to find a mine where there's no conflict involved. And then dive into the dark matter of that phone, see the world through the eyes of a phone, and then see where we can actually improve things. So now, 10 years later, we've sold over 100,000 of phones. We have more than 100 people working in different continents, and we're a profitable company, and we're probably the only phone company at the moment that's growing twice its size every year. But most importantly, we focus on certain areas where we can have improvement. Fair materials, I just told you about it, the mines in Congo, the way things are sourced, but also recycled materials. We look at how can we pay people a living wage in factories. In Chinese factories, not everyone, they're working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and don't make it, a huge income. So we pay our factories, we have a direct relationship, the workers there, a living wage. We have, of course, we recycle, so we get more phones back than we actually put into the system. And we're super proud of that, but I think the most important one is that we make phones that last longer. And it's a super simple calculation. If we make only half the amount of products, if people use their phone twice as long and we can only make half the amount of products, you will also have half the amount of waste. And all these areas are connected to it. But it's kind of, it's a difficult area because it really eats down your business model. So how do we do that? I don't know if I can't really see that well, but is there anyone here who ever replaced their own battery of the phone? I see only like 2 or 3 people. Either you have a Fairphone or you are a top engineer or something. Oh, you have one, see? Yeah, he has a Fairphone. Fantastic. Thanks for the support. But so not that many people can actually change the battery of their phone. And why is that? Because we love thin phones. We are suffering from phone anorexia in some way. And because we want to have really thin phones, they glue the battery to the inside of the phone. And the problem is, you can't change the battery anymore. So what happens after 2 years, the battery goes down, the operator calls and says, your subscription is ending, and you say, well, my battery sucks anyway, it's too expensive to change it, and we'll get a new one. So with Fairphone, at least you can change the battery so people can use the phone longer. But we also made it in such a way that if you drop it, the screen breaks, you can actually replace the parts yourself. So you just order a screen online, you order a camera online, you take the screwdriver and open it up, and there you are. So we'll talk about the business model probably a bit later on, connected to that. But this is something I'm super proud of. This is an image Greenpeace did. They did a research on green electronics, and this has been 3 years ago. And we were just starting as a small company, smallest phone company in the world probably. And we were far ahead of all the other ones as being the greenest consumer electronics in the world, company in the world at that time. So that was Fairphone. That is a lot of technology. But let me quickly also tell you a bit about the Klik. In Dutch, Klik means leftover. And we have a leftover problem. If you go to a restaurant, you eat. And if you eat, you have to make the food. You have peels, you have all kinds of leftover. If you don't finish your food, you have leftover. What happens now, they put that in one big pile, in most of the professional kitchens, at least in Holland. A big truck comes, get it, bring it to the incinerator, burn it, and hallelujah, we have energy. And we think that's a waste. It's really a waste because there's so much more you can do with all these organic resources than burn them. For example, you can make compost. We have a huge problem, soil problem around the world. And I think people have been talking about that already. What if the city can actually feed the farmers, the soil around the cities with the stuff they produce themselves? We take orange, we can get oil from orange peels. We now import a lot of the stuff, at least in Holland, from Brazil. And what if and these peels are all around there already. And people who've been talking a lot with their grandparents, they also know probably that you can use coffee, old coffee, as a fertilizer, right? It's really got good fertile ground. So with the Klik, what we do is we help professional kitchens to separate this, like orange peels with orange peels, coffee with coffee, cooked food with cooked food, uncooked food with uncooked food. And then we collect it at a hub, and we make all kinds of stuff with it. We make compost with it. We get oil from it, and the oil from the orange peels, we make soaps with partners. We make beer with it. And on the mushrooms, we grow. We grow oyster mushrooms. We have like 3-4 of these containers already. This is my colleague Eric, and he's our oyster farmer. And this is just coffee over a week that we've collected in our city in Utrecht. So to wrap it up, the great thing is with the Click that the business model works really well. It's really expensive to do all this for waste, but if you use it as resources, it really helps because all the products we make, we sell them back to the restaurants and the hotels we get the stuff from. You can imagine in a hotel where you have in the morning you have your orange juice, and in the evening you have your soap from that same orange juice. It's kind of a good story, right? So that way we build a whole ecosystem around food, and we make 4 or 5 times more money on selling distributed foods for all these parties we work with than we actually make on the contract itself. We're now with 20 people, and we're just about to go break even in Utrecht. If we have it set up in Utrecht and everything is working fine, we're going to scale up to other cities. It could be Madrid, it could be any city, because we really believe that the blueprint of what we're doing can be picked up by other entrepreneurs all around the city. And I think the faster that goes, the better, because then we won't be wasting any of this beautiful organic resources anymore. So that's a bit of background on the companies.
Thanks so much, Bas. I think the Click is the most inspiring thing I've heard during all this year. So thanks so much for
It's a lot of fun, actually. Also
it's fun. I'm sure. Seeing those smooth rooms, I'm sure it's fun.
Yeah. And I can actually do business in the bar, which is also really nice.
Bas, you put on the table the dark side of the business in both Fairphone and the Click. Tell me a bit about the role of storytelling and transparency and how all that storytelling and transparency support the business model you've created for both.
Well, I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs here, and I think all the entrepreneurs know that anything starts with storytelling. You're selling a story of something you're selling something that's not there yet. If you start a company, that's all there is. And then when investors start believing in you and when customers coming in, then also you need to be able to transform that story into something that really creates impact. And that's where measuring what you do really helps. So you also see, with the startups, so we started with a crowdfunding with Fairphone, and we sold 25,000 phones that didn't exist. We were a company that never made a phone before. And people just believed in the whole thing. I had 7.5 million on my bank account just based on a story. And I can tell you that's pretty stressful. It sounds like hallelujah, and you're going to an island. But then the next step is really to measure that impact and to really. So we work with a theory of change. And we use that theory of change also to measure both with the Click, which is very practically, we actually measure all the things we do, and really helps also for the business. Because if we can show how much carbon footprint we've been able to reduce to our customers, and we tell them if you buy these products back, you even reduce more, it's also an incentive for them to actually support your business again. So we give them all kinds of reports in which they can actually see how much they've reduced by really treating those things as resources and not as waste.
Yeah, I've heard this term of Chief Impact Officer recently, and I loved it. I think I'm sure you're a Chief Impact Officer as well.
Well, I'd rather be CEO, actually.
apart from being the CEO. Okay, Bas, how do you manage this dilemma between the selling more and being sustainable? No, I think it's something we talked about before.
Yeah, so it's really I see it as a philosophical dilemma, and it's a dilemma that we have as human beings, right? It's by being here, we're creating and destroying. And it always surprises me why that would be so hard for a company. It's like, why can't your business model be both good and bad? We're selling phones, and we also know that the more phones we sell, that it's good, because we're showing that there's an ethical alternative, and people need phones, right? But people don't need 5 phones or a phone after 2 years. So what we've done is we've set KPIs at Fairphone, which was really fun, because we have a KPI selling, so it's a performance indicator you put on your company, selling as many phones as possible. And that's great, so everybody goes selling shit, right? And then another KPI is that we want people to use their phone as long as possible. And that's where the heads of like salespeople started exploding, because they can't sell the phone to somebody who already has a phone. People in marketing know that's a disaster, because it means you can't go to the people you already, the people you already have on board. And I think that kind of, we have discussions around that. So should we, we have so many screens left, it's not sustainable to keep them, but we don't want to push the screens to people. And then, at least we have that conversation, and I think that's really what it's about. As a social enterprise, when you're aware of the fact that you're creating and destroying, and you put that in the DNA of the company, and you create mechanisms to actually talk about it, it all helps. But the best thing that you can do always, because it really challenges your business model, is to align your business model with your mission. And that's where we, with Fairphone, for example, are really working hard on rolling out a Fairphone as a service model now, which is a subscription model. Because what happens when you have a subscription, people pay a monthly fee for their phone. For me, instead of intrinsically motivated to sell you another product as soon as possible, I become intrinsically motivated as a company to have you hold on to that phone as long as possible, and to give you good service to keep you holding on. So it's actually a really, really good way of supporting your mission. So, but you sometimes see that, missions are kind of like aligned with the business model instead of the other way around. And for impact companies, that's different.
That's for sure. And Bas, how technology is helping to drive a sustainable business model, let's say at Fairphone and the Click, no? I mean, the longevity part of Fairphone you were pointing out, and the data with the Click, the data.
Yeah, so you can imagine with the Click, there's a lot of authorities that, and for good reasons, that look at food and how it's treated. It took us 3 years to actually to get rid of that orange peels are considered waste legally.
Yeah.
Right. So just it's super important to track and trace everything. We know for sure when we collect stuff at a vegan restaurant that there's no animal byproducts there in the stuff, so we can actually use it as food for feedstock. For animals. Yeah. You can't do that if you don't know where it's coming from. So that data is super, super important. With Fairphone, it's the technology that makes it difficult in terms of the longevity. It's really hard to keep supporting a phone for 5 years, but we're dedicated to it. We give support for 5 years, and we give guarantee for 5 years, warranties for 5 years, because we want that to happen. But it takes a lot of effort to do that. And also like spare parts, everything. The whole industry is just based on like a 1-year cycle. And after 2 years, none of the components that are in a phone now will be sold anymore. So you have to stockpile them somewhere. So it's it's really ridiculous how fast the cycles are in technology, because it's not needed. Your WhatsApp is not going to go faster with 16 processors instead of 8.
Also, let's speak a bit about the scalability of the Click. No, you mentioned before, maybe somebody here is interested. Your model is really disruptive. No, we were speaking before about how you separate the money from the power, and which is the model you are looking at to scale. So please share that with the audience.
Yeah. I think I really believe the venture capital model is flawed for impact-driven companies, and then at its core, because the model for the business model of venture capital is to sell shares again, right? After 5 years, you want to have an exit, you sell the shares. The problem I have with that is that you have investors on board which you trust, is great, but you know for sure they will sell their shares at a certain point, and you don't know to whom. And then your company becomes a bag of potatoes, where basically the highest bidder can actually buy that bag, and you're up in the market. And the problem is your voting right is also sold with it. So all of a sudden, I'm trying to change something from a new kind of perspective in the old economy, and the chance is actually quite big. If I'd be raising cash with voting shares, I'd be eaten by a big waste contractor in 5-6 years from now as a strategic investment. I don't want that. So, or at least I want to have a say in it. So what we're doing is, and there's another element, and I think it's I don't believe in companies just extracting money or extracting a lot of money from by shareholders. I think it has to be capped. So we came up with with a model of issuing. It's called steward ownership. So we issue non-voting shares with a cap, and the cap is there also to provide the investors with an exit. Because it's really hard to have an exit to sell shares if there's no voting right on the shares. So we only have really long-term investors in the company, and we've promised them that we will buy back the shares within 5 to 12 years from the free cash that we have. So the conversation up front is like, okay, but how much money is the company actually will it be able to make and generate for me to pay back? So you're having a really good conversation with your investors up front about the real value of your company and not the speculative value it might have in 5 years from now. And because it's capped, also as a founder, there's also sides to it. You have to say, well, if I'm not involved in the company anymore, I have nothing to say anymore. I also have non-voting right, non-voting shares. And I will never make more than like $500,000 out of the company. It's already put on paper. My shares will be sold by $500,000. And so you still make money, and it's a lot of money. It's my pension, and I love it. And, but you have this conversation up front, also with your co-founders, on, how are we in the game? And just separating money and power doesn't mean that you don't have anything to say if you're an investor. It's just that you make sure that it's not driven by that. And the old model was the only business of business is doing business. Well, it's not like that anymore. Mm-hmm. A business mission might be different from the shareholder and the economic perspective. Mm-hmm. And it's fine. We just let's be honest about that and arrange it.
You mentioned a lot the power of discussions, no? Good discussions, good conversations with the team, discussions up front. And I think that's a very important point. I never was taught at the business school to have a good conversation, to have a good discussion, but I think that's a very important thing as well. And Bas, lastly, could you share briefly with us a bit about your personal passion? Why do you do all this? What gets you going Monday morning, 6 a.m.? What gets you going for doing this kind of disruptive, game changers, adventures?
Well, it's not that I'm waking up and I'm going to heal the world or something. It's, I just have a passion for, finding out how things work, and I love people, just like the differences in people, and it's really, really beautiful to see how the world works through the eyes of a phone. I've been to Congo, conflict areas, I've been in war zones, mm-hmm. I've been negotiating contracts with CEOs in big Chinese factories where I also had to negotiate the labor conditions next to the commercial conditions, and these guys were like, what the fuck is happening? And so it's really, really fun, and you can really have that impact. And for me, it's still that design perspective I have, and I also, as an entrepreneur, I had many, many hard times. They say as a startup CEO, you sleep like a baby, you wake up every 2 hours and cry. It's basically, it's tough, but being able to take a step back and look at it as kind of an art project. Like I said, I've done art school and I've done this, but it really helps to just enjoy the ride, because it is a beautiful way of exploring the world.
So we don't have more time, but please come and speak to this guy if you want later. We've spoken about the dark side to change the world. We've spoken about everything is starting with a story, but then the story needs to be transformed into impact and needs to be measured. We've spoken about integrated KPIs and those powerful discussions in the company. Also, we mentioned the disruption, separating the power from the money, and and the final watch out, the service models that support the mission so well. So thanks so much, Bas. It was great. I will be here forever listening to you.
Thank you. Yeah, great being here.